Hi there, and welcome back to our next story time. The story that I am going to read this evening, actually, there's a book about it, there's a movie about it based on these true events. And so, this is a story article that I found I thought was really neat. It's about the famous Christmas truce of 1914. So, you probably have heard or read the story or whatever during World War I, when there was a brief moment of peace on earth, goodwill towards men. So we're going to read about that story tonight. That's what it's called, the famous Christmas Truce of 1914. In the midst of heated battle during World War I, there was a brief moment of true peace on earth and goodwill toward men. What follows is an incredible story of how the spirit of Christmas overpowered, albeit temporarily, the hostilities of war. During World War I, in the winter of 1914, on the battlefields of Flanders, one of the most unusual events in all of human history took place. The Germans had been in a fierce battle with the British and French. Both sides were dug in, safe in muddy, man-made trenches 6 to 8 feet deep that seemed to stretch forever. On Christmas Eve, German troops began decorating the area around their trenches in the region of Ypres, Belgium, for Christmas. They began by placing candles on trees and then continued the celebration by singing Christmas carols, most notably Stille Nacht, Silent Night. Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright. The Scottish troops in the trenches across from them responded by singing English Christmas carols. The Germans then asked the British to join in. At this point, one very defiant Tommy shouted, "We'd rather die than sing German," to which a German joked aloud, "It would kill us if you did." According to Stanley Weintraub, who wrote about this event in the book Silent Night, signboards arose up and down the trenches. Oh, wait a minute. Was that a... Oh, yeah. Signboards arose up and down the trenches in a variety of shapes. They were usually in English, or, from the Germans, in fractured English. Rightly, the Germans assumed that the other side would not read their traditional Gothic lettering, and that few English understood spoken German. "You no fight, we no fight," was the most frequently employed German message. Some British units improvised "Merry Christmas" banners and waited for a response. More placards on both sides popped up. A spontaneous truce resulted. Soldiers left their trenches, meeting in the middle to shake hands. Along many parts of the line, the truce was spurred on with the arrival of more Christmas trees, Tannenbaum on the German side. These small pines, decorated with candles and strung along the German parapets, captured the Tommies' imagination and prompted them to reciprocate with expressions of goodwill. The two sides continued by shouting Christmas greetings to each other. Soon thereafter, there were calls for visits across the no man's land, where small gifts were exchanged: whiskey, jams, cigars, chocolate, and the like. The artillery fell silent as the soldiers exchanged their gifts and sometimes addresses as they drank together. The truce also allowed a breathing spell, where recently fallen soldiers could be brought back behind their lines by burial parties. Proper burials took place as soldiers from both sides mourned the dead together and paid their respects. At one funeral in No Man's Land, soldiers from both sides gathered and read a passage from the 23rd Psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." In describing the following Christmas Day, a German soldier recorded in his diary, "The English brought a soccer ball from the trenches, and pretty soon a lively game ensued. How marvelously wonderful, yet how strange it was. The English officers felt the same way about it. Thus Christmas, the celebration of love, managed to bring mortal enemies together as friends for a time." The truce spread to other areas of the lines, and there are many stories of spontaneous football matches between the opposing forces. In many sectors, the truce lasted through Christmas night, but in some areas, it continued until New Year's Day. The truce occurred in spite of opposition at the higher levels of the military. Earlier in the autumn, a call by Pope Benedict XV for an official truce between the warring governments had been ignored. Unfortunately, the truce could not last. A British medical officer who had received 2 barrels of beer from the opposing Saxon troops wrote the following: At 8:30 p.m. I fired 3 shots in the air and put up a flag with Merry Christmas on it, and I climbed on the parapet. He, the Germans, put up the sheet with Thank you on it, and the German captain appeared on the parapet. We both bowed and saluted and got down into our respective trenches, and he fired 2 shots in the air, and the war was on again. Another British soldier wrote in his diary, This will be the most memorable Christmas I've ever spent, or likely to spend. Since about tea time yesterday, I don't think there's been a shot fired on either side up to now. Last night turned a very clear, frost moonlit night. So soon after dusk, we had some decent fires going and had a few carols and songs. The Germans commenced by placing lights all along the edge of their trenches and coming over to us, wishing us a happy Christmas. They gave us a few songs, so we had quite a social party. Several of them can speak English very well, so we had a few conversations. Some of our chaps went over to their lines. I think they've all come back, bar one from E Company. They no doubt kept him as a souvenir. In spite of our fires, it was terribly cold and a job to sleep between lookout duties, which are 2 hours in every 6. There must be something in the spirit of Christmas, as today we are all on top of our trenches running about, whereas other days we have to keep our heads well down. After breakfast, we had a game of football at the back of our trenches. We've had a few Germans over to see us this morning. They also sent a party over to bury a sniper we shot in the week. He was about 100 yards from our trench. A few of our fellows went out and helped to bury him. Just before dinner, I had the pleasure of shaking hands with several Germans. A party of them came halfway over to us, so several of us went out to them. I exchanged one of my balaclavas for a hat. I've also got a button off one of their tunics. We also exchanged smokes and had a decent chat. They sat there. They say they won't fire tomorrow if we don't, so I suppose we shall get a bit of a holiday, perhaps. After exchanging autographs and them wishing a happy new year, we departed and came back and had our dinner. We can hardly believe that we've been firing at them for the last week or two. It all seems so strange. At present, it's freezing hard and everything is covered with ice. The letter ends, There are plenty of huge shell holes in front of our trenches, also pieces of shrapnel to be found. I never expected to shake hands with Germans between the firing lines on Christmas Day, and I don't suppose you thought of us doing so either. So after a fashion, we've enjoyed our Christmas. British commanders eventually ordered their troops to resume firing at the enemy and vowed that no such truce would be allowed in the future. After all, they were supposed to be at war. In the subsequent years of World War I, artillery bombardments were ordered on Christmas Eve to ensure that there was no further lulls in the combat. Troops were also rotated through various sectors of the front to prevent them from becoming overly familiar with the enemy. Despite those measures, there were a few friendly encounters between enemy soldiers, but on a much smaller scale than in 1914. The soldiers did resume shooting at each other, but only after, in a number of cases, a few days of wasting rounds of ammunition, shooting at stars in the sky instead of at their newfound friends in the opposing trenches. For those few precious moments, there was peace on earth, goodwill toward men on that battlefield. There's something about Christmas that changes people. As impressive as that event was, it can all be traced back to an even more powerful event that occurred 2,000 years ago in the town of Bethlehem. If we could find it in our hearts to celebrate the spirit of Christmas every day of the year, rather than just one, the world would be a far better place. Indeed, it would be a far better place if we all had that love and kindness and goodwill toward men. What a neat story. It's a good part of history. Thanks for joining me this evening, and I will see you tomorrow.